everyone, let's jump right into this. Welcome to our Masterclass Explainer. Look, after spending over 15 years in early childhood development, my goal today is to completely flip how you evaluate and choose toddler learning tools. If you're a parent, a teacher, or a designer, you know the struggle. You're probably totally overwhelmed by the massive wall of toys out there screaming that they're educational. But by the end of our time together, we're going to cut right through that noise. We're replacing trend-based impulse buys with real expert judgment, so you can confidently spot the tools that actually build language, attention, motor skills, and curiosity. Okay, really quickly, here is our roadmap for today. We'll hit the active exchange principle, look at changing learning conditions, and then talk about choosing skills over trends. We'll wrap up by covering common tool mistakes, building a learning identity, and finish off with some practice questions. The whole point here is to shift you from just being a tool buyer into a confident learning condition designer.
So before we get into the weeds, we have to define what a screen-free learning tool actually is. We're talking about physical objects that specifically invite a child to act, to repeat, and to choose. The absolute magic of these tools, they keep the mental work, the actual thinking, inside the child, rather than the device doing it all for them. And this matters deeply, because when a toddler is truly learning, it doesn't look like neat output on a screen. You see it in their hands reaching, the constant dropping of objects, those babbled attempts to name things. Whether you're setting up a playroom, organizing a classroom, or designing a product, using this definition is an instant upgrade.
All right, let's move into Section 1, the active exchange principle.
Think about it like this. We have two entirely different states of being for a toddler. First, you've got the viewer. This is just pure information delivery. The child is sitting there watching, maybe they tap a screen once, but mostly they're just receiving stimulation. But here's the thing, toddlers aren't just tiny adults. They are literally bodies that think through action. So contrast that viewer with the doer. This is active exchange, reaching, dropping, pausing, trying again. A screen can show a pattern, sure, but toddlers absolutely have to act on physical patterns to really learn them. Let's break that down into plain English. The very first thing a good screen-free tool gives a child is agency. When a kid is stacking blocks, they're testing how the real world responds to what they do physically. They're basically asking the universe, if I do this, what happens? Tapping a digital shape on an app is fundamentally different from holding a block and solving a physical puzzle. And for true skill building, the tool has to sit right in the child's learning zone. The challenge has to be just small enough to matter, but not so easy that they go on autopilot. Let's picture how this actually plays out in real life. A parent at home uses this principle by giving a toddler blocks to stack and, for the 100th time, knock down, letting the kid be the main actor. A teacher provides nesting cups. Notice the cups don't talk or tell the child what to think. They create a size puzzle the child has to solve through touch. And a designer? They structure an open-ended room where there isn't just one giant flashy toy hogging the spotlight, but plenty of room for movement and choice. So the huge takeaway here is that active exchange will always beat passive delivery. Agency is the very first thing a solid tool changes. From now on, I want you to banish the marketing question, is this educational? Instead, you need to ask, does this tool invite active use? I love this analogy. Keep this one in your back pocket. Think of toddler learning like a traditional Beijing Hutton courtyard. The real value of that space isn't one shiny, expensive statue plunked right in the middle. The value is actually in how the empty space invites movement, returning, noticing, and interacting. A truly great learning tool works exactly like that courtyard. Okay, moving right along to Section 2, changing the learning conditions. Let's look at the underlying mechanics here. Notice this step-by-step physical loop a toddler goes through to cement a new skill. Try, feel, adjust, repeat. That right there, that's where a skill becomes real. A screen-free tool fundamentally changes the conditions of learning because it forces this loop to happen. It changes what a kid can notice, what they can manipulate, what they can fail at, and eventually what they can master. And while they're in this loop, something pretty incredible happens to their focus. We're talking about attention that literally stays attached to the physical body, because the kid has to look, reach, grasp, and adjust all at once. In the developmental world, we call this embodied attention. Physical tools force attention to stay locked to action. Screens, on the other hand, often decouple those two things, which is a massive developmental cost for a toddler. Good tools keep them glued together. Here's what that looks like in the wild. A parent changes the conditions simply by letting their kid rebuild a block tower for the 20th time, knowing that repetition is actually refinement, not boredom. A teacher steps back and allows a child to sit with a little healthy frustration, realizing they are right at the edge of their learning zone. And a designer creates a kit with separated ingredients, giving enough structure to invite action, but leaving enough freedom that the learner actually has to think. To quickly sum this up, good tools turn a viewer into a doer. They strike this perfect balance of control, not too restrictive, but not so open that it's chaotic. And most importantly, they make effort meaningful by giving real physical feedback. Think of a good tool like a sturdy floor. It totally supports the child, but it absolutely does not move for them. 2 more quick analogies for you to remember. First, repetition is like water going over the same stone. To us adults, a kid stacking blocks 20 times looks mind-numbing, but to them, it's water, slowly shaping the stone of their capability. Second, attention is like a flashlight. On a screen, the device moves a flashlight for you. With a physical tool, the child has to aim the flashlight themselves. Generating that internal attention is a massive, absolutely crucial skill.
So, how do we apply this? Let's jump into section 3, choosing skills over trends.
Check out this cheat sheet. It maps the physical features of a tool directly to the underlying skills they built. Repetition with physical action, that builds motor planning. Open-ended pieces build flexibility. Sorting features build categorization. But notice what is not on this list? Smartness, right? A toddler doesn't get broadly smarter just because a shiny box says it's educational. They grow because a specific physical feature demands a specific type of repeated thinking. We fall into this trap all the time, thinking that a toy with the alphabet on it magically produces language. It doesn't. What actually matters is what we call the task shape. What is the tool physically asking the child to do? Does it require recognition, matching, sequencing, or repairing an error? The skill comes 100% from the shape of the task, not the paint on the toy. Let's look at the famous China example to see context in action. Imagine a family living in a compact Beijing apartment. A parent there might pick lightweight magnetic tiles over some bulky sound-blasting learning tablet. Why? Because floor space is prime real estate. Building a tower vertically exercises the exact balance and motor skills that specific child needs. A teacher might choose a simple picture book to build shared, joint focus instead of handing out iPads. And a great designer? They create tools that have real depth, things that actually become more interesting over time as the child finds new ways to use them, rather than a toy that reveals all its tricks in the first 5 minutes. The big secret here is that novelty is kind of overrated. Constant new sounds and flashing lights just create really fragile attention. And a skill like language, you don't need a language toy for that. You can build it through the back and forth of block play or reading a book together. The developmental value of a tool isn't absolute. It entirely depends on meeting that specific child exactly where they are at an edge or they can stretch themselves without just shutting down. Now that we know what we want, let's look at the traps. Section 4, avoiding common tool mistakes. There is a huge difference between a tool that looks impressive to an adult and one that actually builds durable skill for a child. A toy with lights and quizzes seems great, but it totally shrinks the child's thinking role. The better move? Plain blocks that force the kid to plan. A flashy alphabet tablet usually replaces active language with just basic recognition. The fix? A picture book with an adult. If you're relying on smart labels on a box, you're confusing basic stimulation with real development. The ultimate sniff test you always have to run is, who is doing the thinking here? If the toy finishes the pattern or practically shouts the answer, the toy is doing the thinking, and we want the child doing the thinking. All right, we are at the finish line. Section 5, building a learning identity, and our summary. You aren't just someone who buys toys anymore. You are a designer of learning conditions. Let's lock in our core truths. 1. Toddler learning demands active exchange, not passive delivery. 2. Screen-free tools matter because they physically change the conditions for action and feedback. 3. Judge tools by the actual mental work they require, that task shape, not by flashy marketing labels. And 4. Always keep the thinking work inside the child. Let's finish up with a little practice to make this stick. Quick questions to judge a tool. Does the child act on it? Can they repeat it? Does it give physical feedback? Does it allow choice? Now think about context. Why the magnetic tiles in a small apartment? Because space is tight, and tiles invite self-directed problem solving without needing a huge footprint. Conceptually, why is a plain old cardboard box often way better than a smart device? Simple. The box forces the child to invent and test their own ideas, keeping the cognitive load exactly where it belongs. I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. Next time you're holding a toy in the store, don't ask what it costs, and don't ask what subject it supposedly teaches. Ask yourself, what kind of learner does this tool help my toddler become? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this masterclass has given you a totally new lens to see through.